Hi doulas, I hope you're well today. In today's video blog, I'm going to chat about something I get a lot of questions about, which is your DONA certification packet and how to fill out the forms. And one of the things I hear all the time is people say, I attended a birth, but I didn't get my forms filled out. And I was like, what? How did you waste that opportunity? So I want to chat about a few things on that note, how to get them filled out, how to make sure you're charting all the right stuff so that you know how to fill it out. So we're going to go through all the forms. It's not the most exciting video blog ever, but if you haven't filled out forms yet or you're having trouble with them, it is the right blog for you. So good luck, and I'll see ya online. Hi doulas, so here we are with our beautiful certification packet. To get your certification packet if you haven't already, of course this is for those of you that have done a DONA International approved training. You're going to go online into the DONA boutique and you're going to purchase your certification packet, and it's going to come to you by email like this in a PDF. Okay, so obviously you can see the word sample is written across here because this is just a sample. This isn't the real deal. One of the things that I strongly recommend is that when you get this, you print this first page, I guess technically the second page, and I want you to write the date here that you purchased your certification packet. That is important because your certification packet expires 2 years after that date. So of course you can purchase an extension if you need, but honestly 2 years is plenty of time to get this thing wrapped up and done, and really it's just going to kind of hang over your head if you take longer than that. So I want to go over a few things with you here today, and a lot of my blogs, video blogs and written blogs are to help you become a doula. So we're going to just assume that we're going to have this done in way less than 2 years. Not to be confused with the length of time that your training is valid for. So your training is actually valid for 4 years. So what that means is, let's say you did doula training a couple of years ago, you could actually come and buy your certification packet and you still have a couple of years of this certification packet before you need to submit. But if you wait even 4 years and 1 day from when you did your doula training, then you need to start over, okay? So just want to make a quick little point about that. Now, a lot of questions come up about the certification process, but listen, this document is amazing and it has all the answers, or almost all the answers, for you in terms of how to get this done. But the one area that I wanted to go over today, I wanted to go over filling out the forms for your births. Okay, because that's where a lot of people make mistakes. I really feel like a lot of the other stuff is pretty self-explanatory, but we're going to skip on over to some of the things that are really important when it comes to attending a birth and filling out the correct forms. So first off, you have to have your client's consent before you take notes about their birth. So we're going to come over here to page 24. I'm going to scroll on down. 24. Okay, so here we go. Client consent. Okay, now, of course you need your client's consent before writing down their personal information. So you're going to make sure that you get this signed by your client, okay? It's a simple one-page client confidentiality release form, and it gives you permission for them to, for you to take, if your clients are giving you permission to take notes about their personal information, their birth, things about them, etc. So number one, you're going to get your client to do that. And listen, your client really doesn't mind filling this out. It's really common in all areas of life to fill out these types of forms. So don't feel too intimidated by asking, okay? It's really not that big of a deal, promise. Now, the second thing for you to have printed out and copies of always in your doula bag is this form of evaluation of labor support services. This is the form that the care providers are going to fill out about your care. And here's the thing I think is really, really important when it comes to getting this from the nurses or doctors or midwife, is I actually don't call it an evaluation. I know it says evaluation, but I don't use that word because look at how many questions there are here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then a fifth one if they want to add any comments. Is 4 questions really an evaluation? You know, it's really more of an acknowledgement of your presence and the support that you gave. And so that's actually the word that I recommend using. So in this new certification packet, one of the things that we have to do as doulas is let the care providers know that we are going to have a quick form for them to fill out to acknowledge our presence at the birth. Doesn't that sound different than evaluating my services? I want you to imagine a nurse, a doctor, or a midwife when they're working with other students, nursing students and residents, and they get evaluated. It's probably pages and pages of stuff. So the term evaluation might be a little confusing for them to really understand what it is that you're going to be asking of them and how much time that's going to take up for them. So, hi, Nurse Samantha. I'm a doula working towards my certification with DONA International, and I'm going to have a quick 4 questions for you to fill out on a piece of paper to acknowledge my presence at this birth. Would that be all right? Sounds so different than I have evaluation for you to fill out after. Okay, so number 1, now make sure you've got those printed out. That's why DONA is now sending you this in PDF. This allows you to get all these things printed out. And also make sure that all of this other information is filled out ahead of time. The birthing person's name, the hospital, and your name. There's no reason for you to be filling that out right after a baby's been born. You can absolutely do that ahead of time, right? So let's have a look now at the forms that we're actually filling out for the birth. So a couple things. Number 1, in this certification packet, you're going to notice that there are 3 different types of record sheets. There's one for a vaginal birth, there's one for a client who was attempting a vaginal birth but ended in cesarean, and there's one for a planned cesarean. Now, you're going to make sure that you're filling out these forms appropriately for the type of birth. So I want to draw to your attention to the fact that there are 3 now. You also don't need to be filling this out throughout the birth, but you do need to be taking notes so that you can fill it out. And you need to know what kinds of questions are on this form so that you're asking the right questions if you need to throughout the birth. Okay, so let's have a look at some of these first few things here we've got. And I think a lot of these are pretty self-explanatory. So I want to draw attention to this one, prenatal status, the number of births and number of pregnancies and number of live children. So this is a term in obstetrics we use called parity. And the parity is represented as a number, and you're going to see this a lot of time at the hospital. You're going to see, for example, 3/1. What does that mean, and why do we see that all the time on clients' forms, or sometimes on those big charts that hospitals have behind the nurse's station, or sometimes in a hallway where they're tracking all the people that are in labor? And you'll see these numbers. What do they mean? Well, the first number is the number of pregnancies. Okay, so that's part of someone's parity. So if we go back to our 3/1 example, it means the person has been pregnant 3 times. The second number is the number of live births, live children that person has. So the live births, for example, 1 means that they have 1 baby. Of course, if they're pregnant at the time they're in labor, then the 3 makes sense. Okay, they have 1 baby, they're in labor, so that's another pregnancy. And it also means they've had 1 other number of pregnancy, another pregnancy at some point. Now that could be a miscarriage, it could be an abortion. Obviously that doesn't matter to us as doulas, but just so that you understand what the parity means. So number of pregnancies, number of live births, okay? And this form asks us the number of living children as well. Now VBAC is a vaginal birth after cesarean, and so that only applies if your client has had a cesarean before. Okay, so it asks us some questions about that. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to draw attention for those of you that live in Canada is some of these midwife terms might not register for you, or you might not understand what it is that they mean. So depending on the country that you're practicing in, these words may not mean something. So this is a professional midwife, so a certified professional midwife, a nurse midwife. And now these are American terms, right? These are American terms, a lay midwife. We in Canada use the term RM, so registered midwife is the typical term that's used. So what that is equivalent to is a professional midwife. Okay? Of course, some family doctors attend births. Here you're going to write down just a couple of key wishes that your client had for their birth. Now, here's where we're going to come down, and here's where I see a lot of people that get so excited for their first birth that they forget to write some of this stuff down. So now that we're going over it together ahead of labor, I hope that's going to help you to make sure that you write it down. So the number of weeks gestation at birth, okay? So in this question, now gestation, of course, is always the number of weeks. So let's say 39, and then the number of days. So 39 and 5 would be almost 40 weeks, right? Because there's 7 days in a week. So 30 and 5 doesn't mean 30 and a half. It means 30 plus 5 days. Got it? By the time we get to 30 plus 39 plus 7, for example, that's actually 40. There's no such thing as 39 plus 7. Got it? Okay. The time that the contractions began. So you're going to fill that out as long as you have it. And when did they become 5 minutes apart? Now remember, contractions are timed from the start of one contraction to the start of the next. When was the first vaginal exam? And what was the dilation at that time? Okay. Now look, what it also asks us is the effacement and the station. Remember, effacement is the length of the cervix, and it's measured in percentages. And the station is where the baby's head is in the pelvis. So how far down or up that pelvis might be in relation to the ischial spines. Now, of course, whenever we're with people in the hospital, everyone always says the dilation, right? A nurse or doctor midwife will say, oh, you're 5 centimeters dilated. But they often don't say the effacement and the station, but they are charting it. So all you have to do is say, oh, hey, Nurse Samantha, could you also let me know what the effacement was? And hey, could you also let me know what the station was? There's no problem in you asking that additional question. And in fact, it's something that we want to talk to our clients about too, is that progress in labor is not just dilation, is it? Progress in labor is also effacement, and it's also station. So that's why those things are relevant and important. And it's not a bad idea to get in the habit of asking those kinds of questions, or of course, encouraging our clients to ask those kinds of questions so they really know what they're dealing with in terms of their progress. Okay, so now this is interesting, right? The start of active labor as perceived by our client. When did they perceive that they were in active labor? When did we perceive that they were in active labor? And that's interesting. And this is an opportunity for you to say why you felt the way you felt. Okay, here's one of the more common questions and mistakes people make on their forms. The length of first stage. Now remember, from your childbirth class that you attended, the first stage of labor is not to be confused with early labor. Stage 1 is dilation, so 0 to 10. Not early labor, it's early, active, and transition. It's all of those together. That's stage 1. Of course, stage 2 is pushing. Stage 3, delivery of the placenta. It says right here, and it tells you, right here, onset to progressing contractions to 10 centimeters. So it tells you that as a reminder. Okay, a couple of other questions around skin to skin and undisturbed contact, breastfeeding, things like that. So that is the first form that you have. Okay, so here's a few other questions, I think pretty self-explanatory. Now, when you're taking notes, there's a few things that you want to be looking for. Okay, number 1, what was happening? What did you do? Okay, what was happening with the client and what were you doing to support them? How was your client reacting to the support? Okay, so there's a few different things that we're looking at there. And then there's a little section here for us to chart some things about our prenatal meetings and our contact with the client. So that might include email contact or phone calls. So you're going to just jot a few notes there. There's an example here of how to fill this out. So before your arrival, okay, and pre-labor. What was going on? How was the client reacting? Did the care provider say anything? And how did you respond? We're always kind of looking at those same different things. And then what happened after you arrived and all the way into the second stage of labor, so to the pushing stage of labor? How did that change? Okay, looking at the birth, looking at the placenta. So again, and the first hour or two after birth with the baby, how did our support help the client? What did we do? What did the care provider say or do? And then we're also gonna chart our postpartum support if that was applicable. Okay, so just a couple of things around the baby's support, how the baby was from a health perspective, and all of those other things. Of course, you're also going to chart what you learned from this experience. And one of the things we all know is birth is different for everybody. And it's going to be many, 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 many births before you have a birth where you think, oh yeah, I've seen all of that before. I know for me in my career, it took me about 50 before I thought to myself, been there, done that. So it's amazing how varied labor can be. So the next sheet that we have here is an unplanned cesarean. So we were with our client laboring and then it ended in a cesarean. Okay, so you're going to see there's just a few different, some differences here, a little bit of change, but basically you're going to fill out the same, just the way we did with the other one. There shouldn't be anything new here except for this end part after the doula's arrival until the cesarean. You're going to just talk a little bit about how that changed and what was different here. And then during the surgery, if you are in the room, which of course in many cases you won't be, which is totally fine. It does not disqualify you from using this birth. But remember, you can only use one cesarean. You don't have to have one cesarean, but you can only use one, okay? So just wanted to make a note about that one. And then the third report that we might be filling out, a record sheet we might be filling out, is the planned cesarean without labor. Again, that's going to be different as well. We're going to notice a few different things around pre-birth and birth, and then of course how the surgery went. So maybe we're going to talk a little bit more about the postpartum support that we provide, and all that we did, before, after, during the cesarean, maybe if we were involved there. So you're going to see that there's some differences there. Okay. All right. So I hope that we've been able to answer some of the most common questions for you and help you to prevent some of those pitfalls. I wish you much luck in your doula certification process, and I'm excited and happy to receive any questions, comments in the question and comment section below. Thanks so much, everyone. Talk soon. Bye.